They say the past is a ghost, a whisper you learn to ignore. But sometimes the past isn't a ghost. It's a predator, patiently stalking, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And it doesn't whisper, it roars. I spent a decade trying to outrun that roar, burying the echoes under suburban lawns and school runs, under the laughter of a life I built, brick by painstakingly normal brick. I thought I was safe. I thought they were safe. Then the silence broke. Not with a bang, but with a crackle on a forgotten frequency. A voice I hadn't heard in years, dripping with venom and a promise of annihilation. Tick-tock. The clock just started. And this time you're not just running from a memory. You're running from the wreckage you left behind. My hands, calloused from years of gripping wrenches, not triggers, started to shake. The innocuous tablet in my grasp felt suddenly heavy, cold. On the screen, a live feed flickered a grainy CCTV angle of my daughter's elementary school. A black SUV idling across the street. Not just idling. Watching. Every breath caught in my throat. A shard of ice. This wasn't a warning shot. This was a declaration of war, delivered with surgical precision. My old life, the one I swore I'd left in the dust of forgotten battlefields, had just returned. And its first move wasn't a threat to me. It was a threat to the only reason I'd ever truly fought to survive. The timer on the corner of the screen began to count down. Every second an axe falling. Every second a step closer to losing everything. The world outside Arthur's window was a blurred memory, indistinct and irrelevant. Inside, his apartment was a tomb of forgotten takeout containers and silent desperation. Each discarded item a monument to his escalating despair. Huddled over a flickering laptop screen, his disheveled hair clung to a forehead damp with a clammy sweat that had nothing to do with the room's chill. His eyes, sunken and haunted, traced cryptic menus on a dark web portal, searching, with a numb, mechanical precision, for an escape hatch. Not from the apartment, not from the city, but from the crushing weight of existence itself. His finger hovered, trembling almost imperceptibly, over a hidden option labeled only, unsubscribe. A breath held, a silent prayer to an indifferent void, as he prepared to click away his own reality. The click was barely a whisper in the suffocating silence, a tiny act with colossal, unforeseen repercussions. Instead of the anticipated fade to black, a sleek, unsettling animation erupted across the screen. Ethereal tendrils of light coalescing into a stylized, predatory corporate logo. Arthur flinched, his breath catching in his throat. This wasn't oblivion. This was branding. A moment later, the animation dissolved, replaced by stark, corporate gray text against a pristine white background. A cold, digital voice, devoid of emotion, materialized from the speakers. Cancellation services incur a mandatory processing fee. Please proceed to your nearest processing terminal for verification. The void had a customer service department, and Arthur, it seemed, was now a reluctant client. A chilling, bureaucratic echo of his most desperate act. The screen shimmered, morphing from the corporate disclaimer to a stark, simplified map. A red beacon pulsed rhythmically, highlighting an address in a forgotten industrial sector of the city. A place Arthur couldn't recall ever having a reason to visit. His first instinct was to slam the laptop shut, to dismiss the whole surreal encounter as a dark, twisted glitch. But the tendrils of morbid curiosity, intertwined with the deep-seated exhaustion of having no other perceived options, began to pull. This absurd corporate death sentence was, in its own horrifying way, a path. A final, desperate adventure. With a sigh that carried the weight of 1,000 defeated hopes, Arthur pushed himself off the worn sofa, a nascent sense of fatalistic resolve hardening in his eyes. He would go. He had to know. The city's concrete veins led Arthur through a labyrinth of forgotten ambition and decay, the digital world's sterile precision replaced by the gritty reality of urban neglect. The address delivered him to a behemoth of stained brick and shattered dreams, an anonymous, dilapidated building that seemed to actively repel sunlight. Graffiti, faded like old scars, marred its lower walls, and broken windows stared out like vacant eyes. A single, flickering fluorescent sign above a steel door announced, "Processing and Logistics," a stark, absurd contrast to the sleek digital interface that had initiated this nightmare. A tremor of paranoia snaked through Arthur. This wasn't a place of quiet exits. This was a place where things were processed. The air itself felt heavy with unspoken dread, the building exhaling a silent, industrial sigh. Beyond the grim facade, the building's interior was a jarring, almost clinical surprise. The lobby was a stark expanse of polished concrete and frosted glass, devoid of any warmth or personal touch, the complete antithesis of the exterior. A single, impossibly pale receptionist, seemingly carved from ice, sat behind a thick, frosted glass counter. Her gaze was as flat and unreadable as the counter itself. No greetings, no pleasantries, just a cold, metallic instruction that cut through the sterile silence. Iris scan required for access. A beam of chilling blue light swept across Arthur's eye. A cold intrusion that felt less like verification and more like a final, irreversible branding. Then the pronouncement, delivered with chilling, machine-like precision, "Proceed to level -2. The abyss, it seemed, had an elevator. The elevator doors hissed shut with a sound that seemed to seal Arthur's fate. Inside, the chamber was a brutalist box of cold, brushed steel, every surface reflecting the harsh, unforgiving light. The descent began, silent but for the faint, metallic hum that amplified Arthur's every ragged breath, every beat of his frantic heart. The floor indicators flickered downward, each digit a hammer blow against his dwindling hope. -1, -2. The silence was no longer empty. It was a crushing weight, a soundproof vacuum designed to trap and amplify his mounting terror. He was sinking, not just into the earth, but into a chilling, unknown dimension of bureaucratic despair. Each tick marking the inexorable approach to an encounter he desperately wished he could escape. The elevator doors parted with a soft, almost imperceptible sigh, revealing a stark, well-lit room bathed in an almost surgical glow. There, across a minimalist, holographic table, sat the operator, a woman in her late 40s, composed, elegant, yet radiating an unsettling, predatory intelligence. Her gaze, sharp and unwavering, cut through Arthur with an unnerving precision, as if she could peel back the layers of his existence with a mere glance. The table hummed softly, projecting abstract data patterns that seemed to shift and coalesce with her thoughts. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that she knew everything. Every mistake, every regret, every desperate plea. This wasn't an interview. It was an interrogation, and Arthur was already fully exposed. The operator's voice was a soft, silken rasp, yet each word landed with the concussive force of a hammer blow. "Life is a subscription service, Mr. Vance," she began, her tone devoid of judgment, yet brimming with chilling certainty. "And like all services, cancellation incurs a fee, not monetary." Her eyes, cold and unwavering, bore into his, delivering the true, devastating impact. A service. The holographic table flickered, presenting not bills, but grim, abstract schematics that seemed to pulse with a dark energy. Arthur's blood ran cold. The bleak reality, the deadly stakes, crystallized in that moment. This wasn't about money. It was about exchange. A life for a life. His cancellation had just become a terrifying, irreversible transaction, demanding a price far greater than he could ever have imagined. A chilling blue light pulses, coalescing into a holographic contract that hangs suspended between them. Its text, stark and unforgiving, shifts before Arthur's eyes, revealing the true, horrific price of his cancellation. It demands nothing less than a discreet termination for the shadowy entity known only as Lethe. The operator's voice, a silk-clad icicle, details the terms. Success guarantees Arthur his own desired oblivion, a clean, silent exit from the stage of life. But failure, or even refusal to undertake this monstrous task, carries a far more terrifying consequence. A subscription termination so agonizingly public, so drawn out, It makes his previous despair seem like a distant whisper. The air grows heavy, thick with the scent of fear and the promise of blood, trapping Arthur in a web of corporate evil he never knew existed. His heart pounds, a frantic drum against the encroaching darkness. The holographic display flickers, the cold blue light morphing into a blurred, ghostly image. Subject, Elias Thorne. The operator's voice drones, devoid of emotion. Known dissident. Threat to system stability. The words are clinical, designed to sterilize any empathy. Arthur strains to focus on the indistinct features, a flicker of something human, vulnerable, peeking through the digital haze. A sudden, visceral jolt runs through him. This isn't the face of a monster, a criminal mastermind. It's the face of a man, indistinct yet strangely ordinary. His gut clenches, a deep, unsettling intuition whispering that the carefully constructed narrative is a lie. The corporate jargon, the sterile environment, the demand for murder, it all clashes with the quiet humanity he perceives in that blurred image. His moral compass, long dormant, begins to twitch, sensing a profound wrongness at the heart of this impossible proposition. The weight of the decision presses down on Arthur, a crushing, suffocating force. Commit murder, extinguish a life he knows nothing about, to earn his own longed-for peace. Or refuse, condemn himself to a protracted public torment, an agonizing death that makes oblivion seem like a sweet dream. His mind races, a maelstrom of fear, revulsion, and a desperate, illogical spark of self-preservation. The sterile room feels smaller, the air thinner, as the operator's unblinking, predatory gaze drills into him. Her stillness is unnerving, her silence more potent than any threat. Every second stretches into an eternity, the ticking of an invisible clock echoing in his ears. This isn't a negotiation. It's an ultimatum, a final, brutal choice between two unthinkable fates. The burden of this impossible decision threatens to shatter him. A ragged, guttural sigh tears from Arthur's chest, laden with the weight of 1,000 lost souls. His shoulders slump, a visible surrender to the crushing inevitability. The fight drains from his eyes, replaced by a dull, aching emptiness. He nods, a barely perceptible movement that seals his damnation more irrevocably than any spoken word. The operator's lips, previously a thin, straight line, curl into a cold, calculated smile, a serpent's grin of triumph. "Welcome to the final service, Mr. Vance," she purrs, her voice imbued with a chilling finality. Her words aren't a welcome. They're a brand, searing the mark of a killer onto his soul. In that sterile, unforgiving chamber, Arthur ceased to be merely a man seeking an end. He became a weapon, a tool, bound to a system far more insidious than he could ever have imagined. His fate, once a personal tragedy, had just become a corporate transaction. The sterile comfort of the operator's chamber evaporates, replaced by the stark, brutal reality of a high-tech training area. Cold, hard surfaces and minimalist glowing displays dominate the space. Arthur is pushed forward by an unseen force, facing a grizzled, silent figure, the handler. Mid-50s, scars etched deep into his face, eyes like chips of flint. The handler is a living embodiment of the lethal world Arthur has entered. His voice, when it comes, is a low growl, devoid of pleasantries, each word a command. No questions. Follow orders. Or you're next. The unspoken threat hangs heavy in the air, a palpable shroud of danger. Every movement the handler makes, every flicker of his eyes, speaks of a ruthless efficiency, hammering home the chilling truth. Arthur is no longer a man, but a disposable asset in a deadly corporate game. The air smells of ozone and old sweat. Gloves' hands, quick and impersonal, move with surgical precision. A discreet comms device is fitted into Arthur's ear, the cold plastic pressing against his skin, a constant whisper of surveillance. Then, a subtle prick, a faint burning sensation on his lower back, a tracking implant, seamlessly integrated, rendering him a controllable, on some unseen map. He feels it burrowing beneath his flesh, a parasitic invader, robbing him of the last vestiges of his autonomy. The technology is insidious, silent, and absolute. He is no longer Arthur Vance, a man with a choice. He is a pawn, a numbered piece on a corporate chessboard, every move monitored, every breath catalogued. The weight of this complete loss of control is immense, a psychological cage pressing in on him. He can feel the threads of the system, tightening, pulling him into its deadly dance. Days bleed into a chilling montage of observation. Arthur, a ghost in the urban landscape, watches Elias Thorne. From the hushed anonymity of a cafe window, through the grainy lens of a discreet long-range scope, he sees a life unfold. Thorne is not the hardened dissident Lethe described. He's a quiet man, perhaps a journalist or an academic, hunched over a laptop in a library, sipping coffee in a bookstore, walking with a thoughtful, unassuming air. There's no trace of the threat to system stability in his mundane routines, only the quiet cadence of an ordinary existence. Arthur's doubts, once mere flickers, now solidify into a stark, uncomfortable truth. The official narrative crumbles with each innocent gesture Thorne makes, leaving Arthur to grapple with the disturbing realization that he might be hunting a ghost, or worse, an innocent man. Late into the night, the sterile glow of a data pad illuminates Arthur's face as he pores over the redacted dossier on Elias Thorne. Page after page of blacked-out information, glaring gaps in the narrative, and suspiciously omitted details jump out at him like screaming omissions. The official story, designed to justify the unthinkable, begins to unravel under his desperate scrutiny. Each inconsistency, each deliberate blank, chisels away at his already fractured resolve, deepening the cracks in his ethical framework. He sees not just a man but a fabrication, not just a target but a victim of a monstrous deception. A profound ethical crisis ignites within him, making him question everything he's been told, everything he's agreed to. The chilling realization that he might be a pawn in a far more sinister game than mere cancellation washes over him, a cold tide of dread and moral outrage. The public terminal hummed, a deceptive oasis of anonymity in a city built on constant oversight. Arthur's fingers, light as ghosts, danced across the grimy keyboard, searching for Lethe. He typed with a phantom hope, a desperate plea for a crack in the corporate facade that had swallowed his life whole. The search bar glowed, then flickered, a transient moment of false promise. But the system wasn't just blocking him. It was watching. A stark, crimson error message bled across the screen, dissolving into digital static. Simultaneously, his comms device, tucked deep in his pocket, vibrated with a jolt that pierced his chest. A synthetic voice, cold and unwavering, whispered directly into his mind. "Focus on your assignment, Mr. Vance. Do not deviate." The air around him seemed to thicken, a silent, unseen net tightening. He wasn't just being observed. He was being managed, his every stray thought an infraction. A shadow detached itself from the indifferent crowd, solidifying into the handler, appearing as if conjured from the very anxieties that gnawed at Arthur. There was no sound, no discernible approach, just an immediate, chilling presence that stole the breath from Arthur's lungs. The handler's gaze was a physical weight, pinning Arthur in place, stripping away any pretense of free will. "You're thinking too much, asset," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that carried an unspoken threat. "The fee demands a clear mind, unburdened, efficient." Each word was a carefully placed stone in Arthur's path, a barrier to any deviation, any spark of rebellion. The handler's proximity was a constant reminder of the leash, the invisible, unbreakable chain that bound Arthur to a fate he desperately wished to escape, his heart now a frantic drumbeat against the handler's unyielding calm. From the anonymous refuge of a park bench, Arthur watched. Thorne wasn't a dossier, or a grim statistic, but a son. He was laughing, a genuine, unburdened sound, as his elderly mother struggled playfully with a kite. Her smile, fragile and full of life, mirrored his own. There was an ease to their interaction, a profound, simple affection that resonated deep within Arthur, a man who had long ago forgotten such warmth. Every gesture, Every shared glance chipped away at the hardened shell Arthur had built around the target. This wasn't a life easily discarded. This was a life intertwined, cherished, deeply human. The chilling calculus of cancellation fractured, replaced by a searing clarity. He could not be the architect of such an indelible wound. The cold contract felt like ash in his mouth, his resolve solidifying into an unwavering refusal. The market was a sensory overload, a chaotic symphony of shouts, a kaleidoscope of faces, and the pungent aroma of spices. Arthur moved with practiced anonymity, his gaze sweeping, always vigilant. Then, a sudden jolt, a clumsy collision, and he found himself staring directly into the eyes of Thorn. Time seemed to warp, stretching the fleeting second into an eternity. Thorn's eyes, previously alight with warmth from the park, now held a flicker of something profound, not just recognition, perhaps, but a deep, unsettling sadness, or even an unspoken understanding that transcended their brief, physical contact. A wave of unease, cold and visceral, washed over Arthur. It was more than a bump. It was an entanglement, a silent acknowledgement that shattered the careful distance he had tried to maintain. The market's noise faded, leaving only the echo of that unsettling gaze, a premonition of fates intertwining. Miles away, in the hushed, cavernous control room of the Lethe facility, the operator sat amidst a silent symphony of glowing monitors. Her fingers, long and elegant, danced across a holographic interface, pulling up surveillance feeds of Arthur's recent movements. Every glance, every hesitation, every subtle shift in his demeanor was meticulously catalogued, cross-referenced. Her face, framed by the cold blue light of the screens, remained unreadable, a porcelain mask of professional detachment. Yet, a subtle, almost imperceptible tightening in her jaw, a faint clench in her hand resting on the console, betrayed the razor-sharp edge of her perception. She was not merely observing. She was calculating, adapting. Arthur's wavering resolve, his nascent defiance, was a variable she recognized, a potential instability that needed to be factored into the equation, and if necessary, brutally corrected. The mission details were delivered with surgical precision, each word a hammer blow against Arthur's dwindling resistance. Location: a derelict industrial district. Time: 0300. Escape route: a precise, timed window through the city's labyrinthine underbelly. The handler's voice, devoid of any discernible human emotion, emphasized ruthless efficiency, the absolute necessity of zero deviation. Precision, he articulated, is paramount. Any hesitation, any stray thought, compromises the entire operation. He gestured to holographic projections that detailed Thorn's route, his apartment layout, every potential angle of approach and escape. The stark reality of the task settled over Arthur like a shroud. The clock, both literal and existential, was ticking relentlessly towards an irreversible decision, a point of no return where his life, and potentially Thorn's, would be irrevocably altered. Night had swallowed the city whole, leaving only streaks of neon bleeding across rain-slicked concrete. Arthur moved through the downpour, a phantom in the urban decay, his form blurred by the sheeting rain. Thorn's apartment building loomed ahead, a monolithic silhouette against the bruised sky, its windows dark and uninviting. Every splash of his boots against a puddle, every distant siren, seemed amplified, a discordant soundtrack to his pounding heart. This wasn't just a physical approach. It was a descent into an abyss, a crossing of a moral event horizon. The weight of his mission, the chilling clarity of what he was about to do, pressed down on him, suffocating. He reached the shadowed entrance, hand hovering over the cold metal, adrenaline surging through his veins, the line between compliance and damnation impossibly thin. The air was thick with tension, each raindrop a cold reminder of his impending, irreversible breach. With the silent grace of a predator, Arthur reached Thorn's door, his hand already on the sleek, silent breaching tool. The rain still hammered outside, a frantic rhythm against the glass, masking any other sound. His breath hitched, every nerve ending screaming. This was it. The final moment before an act that would forever stain his soul. But as his fingers tightened, his comms device, usually a silent conduit of command, crackled violently. It wasn't the crisp, authoritative tone of the operator. A new voice, distorted, urgent, and tinged with desperation, whispered directly into his ear. A frantic plea from an unknown source. "Don't do it, Arthur. They're lying. He's trying to help you." The words slammed into him, stopping him cold, wrenching him from the precipice of his grim task. A new, terrifying layer of deception and revelation just opened up. The lock clicked, a feeble protest against the inevitable. Arthur, heart hammering, breached the room, weapon raised. But no ambush awaited. Only Thorn, silhouetted against a grimy window, a man carved from resignation. He wasn't surprised, not even startled. Just waiting. He turned, his gaze heavy, a knowing sadness in his eyes that cut deeper than any blade. "I knew you'd come, Arthur," he murmured, his voice a gravelly whisper. "I've been trying to expose Lethe for years, piecing together their monstrous game. I wasn't the target. Not really. You are. You always were." The words hung in the suffocating air, a chilling prophecy confirming Arthur's worst fears, pulling the thread of his unraveling world tighter. Thorn paced slowly, each word a hammer blow against Arthur's dissolving reality. "Lethe doesn't offer peace, Arthur. It offers a new kind of prison, a different kind of death." He explained the chilling truth. Lethe was a predator, harvesting the desperate, the suicidal, those easily erased. Instead of oblivion, they became unwitting tools, phantom assassins unleashed upon targets of Lethe's choosing. The cancellation fee wasn't payment for an end. It was activation, a digital tether to a dark purpose. And once the job was done, once their utility expired, they were simply disposed of. Their deaths, just another statistic, another accident, another suicide. Arthur wasn't just in danger. He was already a weapon, primed for self-destruction. A sudden, sharp crackle in Arthur's comms ripped through the air, piercing the fragile quiet of Thorn's grim explanation. The operator's voice, devoid of warmth or hesitation, cut through the static like a scalpel through flesh. "Mission compromised. Subject Thorn has been identified as a hostile asset." Arthur froze, his blood turning to ice. The handler's earlier, vague instructions now coalesced into a terrifying clarity. "Terminate Thorn." Then, the operator continued, his voice chillingly calm. "Terminate yourself. Protocol Sigma." It was an order for a double murder, a forced suicide, delivered with the bureaucratic indifference of an automated message. The choice was stark, impossible, and utterly horrifying. Kill or be killed, but not by his own hand. The silence shattered. Before Arthur could even process the impossible command, the apartment door splintered inward, a thunderous crash of wood and metal. A whirlwind of black-clad figures, Lethe operatives, swarmed in, weapons blazing. Arthur reacted on instinct, shoving Thorn behind cover as he returned fire, the pistol a jarring extension of his arm. Bullets tore through the drywall, plaster exploding in a choking cloud. Close quarters combat erupted, a brutal dance of ducking, weaving, and desperate maneuvers. The air filled with the deafening roar of gunfire, the frantic cries of effort, the sickening thud of impacts. Escape wasn't an option. It was a desperate, bloody necessity, a primal scream against annihilation. Amidst the deafening cacophony of gunfire and splintering debris, Arthur found himself face to face with a familiar, hardened gaze. The handler, among the relentless Lethe operatives, breached through the smoke. For a fleeting, agonizing second, their eyes locked. Arthur, grimy and desperate, a man fighting for his very existence, not as an assassin, but as a victim. Thorn, defiant even as he dodged a hail of bullets, a symbol of resistance. The handler's trigger finger paused, the cold glint of his weapon momentarily forgotten. A flicker of something, a shadow of conscience, a ghost of doubt, crossed his stoic face. A crack in the corporate veneer, a human moment amidst the bloody, bureaucratic slaughter, gone as quickly as it appeared. They burst onto the rooftop, gasping for breath. The city's neon glow a dizzying blur below. The rain had begun, slicking the concrete, turning every leap into a treacherous gamble. Lethe operatives, relentless and numerous, poured out behind them. It was a frantic, death-defying scramble across a dizzying labyrinth of rooftops. Arthur, fueled by raw adrenaline, led the charge. Thorn, surprisingly agile for his age, matching his desperate pace. Parkour moves, born of necessity, saw them clearing vast gaps, sliding down wet inclined surfaces, the rhythmic thud of their pursuers' boots echoing behind them. The wind whipped at their clothes, the city lights blurred into streaks of color, a beautiful, deadly backdrop to their desperate flight, each rooftop a fragile bridge between life and death. Huddled in the temporary reprieve of a hidden rooftop alcove, rain plastering their hair, Arthur finally asked the question that gnawed at him. "How did you know?" Thorn, catching his breath, eyes scanning the perimeter, revealed the chilling truth. He hadn't just known Arthur. He'd been tracking him. For years, Thorn had been meticulously mapping a pattern. Cancellations always leading to assassinations. A macabre constellation of victims turned killers. He'd found Arthur's profile, a man teetering on the edge, a perfect candidate for Lethe's cruel system, in a cache of leaked data. You were set up from the beginning, Arthur. From the moment you clicked unsubscribe, you were marked. A pawn in a game you never even knew you were playing. The supposed safe house, a disused warehouse on the outskirts, offered a deceptive promise of refuge. But the moment they stepped inside, a cold dread descended. The air was too still, the silence too heavy. It wasn't a haven. It was a cage. From the shadows, figures emerged, weapons glinting, cold eyes fixed on them. Lethe forces, in overwhelming numbers, had anticipated their every move. Then, on a nearby, flickering screen, the operator's face appeared cold, triumphant, devoid of mercy. "Welcome home, Arthur," he murmured, a chilling, almost playful tone in his voice. They were surrounded, cornered, the concrete walls closing in like a coffin. There was no escape, no hidden door, only the crushing inevitability of the trap sprung. The operator's holographic form shimmered, a venomous smile playing on her lips. Her words were a chilling revelation, each one a shard of ice shattering Arthur's already fragile reality. "Did you truly think we'd let an asset walk free, Mr. Vance? Oblivion is a privilege, not a right. The cancellation fee was always your own life, a commodity to be repurposed for our benefit." The truth was a physical blow, stripping away the last vestiges of his desperate hope. He wasn't seeking an end, he was merely switching systems, unknowingly signing himself over to a deeper, more insidious form of control. Her voice, once soothing, now dripped with mocking disdain. "You fulfilled your purpose, Arthur, and now your essence belongs to us." The suffocating weight of this profound deception pressed down, threatening to crush him completely, but in the abyss of despair, a tiny flicker of defiance ignited. The truth ignited a firestorm within Arthur. The despair that once clouded him burned away, replaced by a primal, desperate rage. He wasn't fighting for death anymore. He was fighting for the right to choose. Beside him, Thorn moved with brutal efficiency, a whirlwind of fists and elbows. But the odds were overwhelming, the security forces relentless, a tide of silent, armored figures. Arthur ducked a heavy blow, pain flaring in his ribs, then retaliated with a ferocity he hadn't known he possessed. Every impact resonated through him, every evaded strike a small victory. This wasn't elegant combat. It was a desperate, brutal dance of survival, a visceral struggle to tear himself free from the clutches of a system that sought to consume him. The air crackled with kinetic energy, the metallic clang of impacts echoing in the confined space, a symphony of desperate defiance. In the maelstrom of violence, a sudden, unexpected shift. The handler, who had orchestrated so much of Arthur's torment, turned. A swift, brutal strike to a fellow guard's temple. Then another, a calculated flurry of betrayals. The cold, corporate mask fell away, revealing a flicker of conscience beneath the years of conditioning. "This isn't what I signed up for." His voice, rough and strained, cut through the chaos. He became a vital whirlwind, diverting the relentless flow of security forces, creating a precious opening, a strategic breach in their unyielding defense. More than just a diversion, he whispered critical intel, coordinates, vulnerabilities. A decisive break from the system he'd served, a last-ditch attempt at atonement, creating a sliver of hope where moments ago there was none. His choice was a gamble, but it bought them precious time, a chance. Thorn, his breath ragged, motioned towards a heavily fortified, yet deceptively mundane, corporate structure on their digital map. "That's it," he rasped. "The beating heart of Lethe. Not some hidden bunker or an abandoned facility, but a gleaming skyscraper, camouflaged in plain sight amidst a bustling city, a monument to corporate anonymity." He explained its insidious purpose. The cancellation service was merely a front, a honey trap designed to identify and harness individuals at their lowest ebb, to funnel them into a global network of control and manipulation. Billions of lives, reduced to data points, resources to be harvested, all from within these innocuous walls. The true core, a sinister intelligence, thrived in the heart of this bureaucratic labyrinth, orchestrating global narratives, shaping destinies, its tendrils reaching into every corner of society. The sheer scale of the deception was breathtaking, terrifying. The realization hit Arthur with the force of an epiphany. He couldn't unsubscribe from this life by simply dying. That was Lethe's trap, their ultimate control. The only true cancellation was to dismantle the system itself, to expose its chilling machinations for all the world to see. This wasn't a desperate flight from life, but a resolute embrace of purpose, a purpose far grander than his own shattered existence. He looked at Thorn, then at the handler if he still stood beside them. The fight was no longer for personal escape, but for the countless others unknowingly caught in Lethe's web. A quiet strength settled over him, a steel resolve replacing the earlier despair. His life, once deemed worthless, now had a value beyond measure, a weapon against the very entity that sought to control it. This was his choice, his fight. The infiltration was a ballet of precision and desperate urgency. Arthur, Thorn, and the grimly determined. Handler moved through the high-tech labyrinth of Lethe's hub like ghosts. Laser grids, invisible until an errant breath disturbed them, crisscrossed silent corridors. Biometric scanners hummed, their red eyes searching, forcing them to move with an almost superhuman stealth. Every shadow a potential ally, every flickering screen a momentary distraction. The air grew thick with the metallic tang of ozone and the faint hum of unseen machinery. Each click of a disarmed panel, each muted thud of a silently neutralized guard, escalated the tension. They were deep within the monster's belly now, the oppressive atmosphere a constant reminder of the stakes. One wrong move, one misplaced footstep, and the entire system would descend upon them, extinguishing their purpose, their lives, in an instant. The control room hummed with the pulse of global data. At its heart, the operator, silhouetted against a cascade of flickering screens, finally faced Arthur. Her voice, calm and laced with an unnerving familiarity, began its psychological assault. "Still fighting, Arthur? After all you've seen, all you've lost, you truly believe you can win?" She painted vivid pictures of his past despair, twisting his darkest moments into tempting invitations for surrender. But Arthur stood firm, his new purpose a shield against her manipulative barbs. The echoes of his old self resonated, but they were distant, fading. His gaze met hers, unwavering. "I believe," he stated, his voice quiet but resolute, "that some things are worth fighting for, even if the fight feels unwinnable. And you will fall." The air crackled, not with physical blows, but with the clashing titans of will and ideology. While Arthur held the operator's gaze, a flurry of frantic keystrokes echoed from a side console. Thorn, hunched over a terminal, worked with a furious, desperate intensity, racing against an invisible clock. His fingers flew across the keyboard, uploading the irrefutable evidence of Lethe's global operations, the data harvesting, the manipulation, the repurposed lives, to a public network, a digital shot heard around the world. The operator's smug composure shattered. Her eyes darted to the screen behind Thorn, horror dawning as she realized his intent. Her voice rose, a sharp, panicked command. "Stop him! Now!" But Arthur merely held her gaze, a silent testament to his resolve, buying Thorn the precious, fleeting seconds needed to sever Lethe's tendrils from the unsuspecting world. The system's vulnerability was now exposed, a critical, fatal flaw in their meticulously built empire, and the consequences would be catastrophic. The man who once longed for oblivion now fought for a future he might never see. Arthur, battered and bleeding, saw the flicker of hope in Thorn's strained face, the countdown on the terminal a searing brand in his vision. Every fiber of his being screamed in protest, but a new, defiant fire burned within. He wasn't fighting for death, but for a meaningful end to the insidious cycle of exploitation. With a primal roar, he threw himself forward, a desperate, final lunge, locking his shaking hands around the throat of the approaching guard. The impact jarred his teeth, the cold steel of a weapon glancing off his temple, but he held on, a human shield, buying Thorn the precious, agonizing seconds needed to breach the final firewall. This was not a surrender. This was a war cry, etched in the gritted teeth and raw courage of a man who had finally chosen to live, if only for this single, monumental act of defiance. Then, a torrent, a digital floodgate ripped open, and the carefully guarded secrets of Lethe spilled into the ether. Thorn's fingers froze on the keyboard, her chest heaving, the victory tasting like ash and triumph. But there was no time for relief. Instantly, the facility erupted. Klaxons wailed, tearing through the suffocating silence, strobe lights flashing violently, painting the grim corridors in a chaotic mosaic of red and white. On screens, security feeds glitched, then dissolved into a cascade of leaked data. Financial records, twisted contracts, the faces of countless subscribers. Across the globe, news channels initially broadcasting mundane reports suddenly fractured. Cryptic headlines flashed. Massive data breach. Lethe exposed? Worldwide UNSUBSCRIPTION? Morphing into urgent, undeniable truths. The machine of exploitation, so vast and untouchable, began to shudder, its foundations cracking under the weight of its own dark truths, unleashed upon an unsuspecting world. The era of Lethe was over. The reckoning had begun. The smoke still cleared around me, the sirens wailing in the distance like the echoes of a nightmare finally breaking. My daughter, bruised but breathing, clung to me, her small hand an anchor in the chaos. I had faced down the architect of this torment, the ghost of my past made flesh, and in that final, brutal dance, something shifted within me. The rage, the fear, the instinct to protect, they weren't buried anymore. They were resurrected, tempered by fire. I had saved her, but the world wasn't suddenly safe. It never would be, not for me. Standing amidst the wreckage, the city lights painting a stark contrast against the rising dawn, I understood. This wasn't an ending. It was a recommitment. The quiet life was a fragile illusion, shattered beyond repair. The enemy was defeated, yes, but the game was eternal. And I was no longer a reluctant player. I was a warrior who had found his purpose again, sharpened by the blade of necessity. The cost was immense. My anonymity, my assumed peace, perhaps even a part of my soul. But as I looked at her innocent face, bathed in the orange glow, I knew the price was worth it. The past would always be a part of me, but now so was the future. And this time I wouldn't be running. I'd be waiting, ready.